Hi and welcome to today's webinar where we are looking into the future and going all in on 2024. Super exciting topic, obviously very much in line with what we should be doing in November, right? My name is Tove. I'm Jobilon's Demand Generation Manager, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And before we get to meet our panel of experts, all three very inspiring women here, I'd like to quickly just introduce Jobilon as well, since some of you might not be familiar with us. So when it comes to Jobilon, we're a flexible talent acquisition platform for large companies really across the globe. We have a lot of strengths, I would say, but some of our most appreciated features are our beautiful and customizable job ads, our wide variety of recruitment marketing options, and it's also very easy to stay in contact with both candidates and the team while using the platform. So some of our most appreciated features. But enough about us. Let's meet our panel for today. Now, Elena, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so very much for inviting me here. So I am Elena, and I am a CHRO and communication executive. My latest position was the VP of Global Communications and Employee Experience at Oriflame Cosmetics, where I spent actually 16 years of my career. And now I'm running my own consultancy within employee experience, helping leaders to drive transformations, but also helping leaders to fix their personal brands in order to drive those transformations. So happy to be here and share my experience from Oriflame, but also from other companies that I have met.
Very, very nice to have you, Elena. And Sahar?
Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Sahar Kupersmidt, and I always pronounce my name twice because it's not so easy. Sahar Kupersmidt is my name. And like Elena, I was actually at the last company I was with 16 years also. I was the Chief People and Culture Officer at Viaplay Group for many years until recently. And now I also have my own business helping companies align their people strategies with their business strategies, and also help them make their people strategies actionable.
Very interesting. And I love that both of you have that same storyline with 16 years. But Eilin, you're still at Simployer.
I'm still at Simployer.
Very good.
Well, thanks for inviting me to this webinar, first of all. My name is Eilin Gillesen. I'm the Chief People and Culture Officer in Simployer. I've been with Simployer for 2 years, and Simployer is an HR tech company where we have the HRM or platforms to make a good employee experience, but also expertise within the field of HR. So I had the dream job of being HR within an HR tech company. So I feel very fortunate for this opportunity.
It's almost like an inception moment where it's like HR in HR. And now you're also, of course, talking about HR, right? So
yes,
we love it. But we're so happy to have all three of you here. And obviously, as you can hear the audience as well, there's a lot of expertise on this panel. So there's, going to be a lot of nuggets of wisdom, I would say, in this webinar. But what are we talking about today? Well, the background to this webinar is really that we're releasing a trend report, which we do annually, and it's releasing tomorrow. And we have 7 trends in recruitment for 2024, and we're going to focus on 3 of them in this webinar. We'll touch upon the others as well, but of course, you'll also get access to the full report after this so that you can check out the other 4. But what we'll do is really give you a brief overview of the topic itself and kind of the findings, and then we'll discuss how to best adapt and leverage on these trends. And then towards the end, we'll also talk a bit about the job market in the Nordic region in general. We are recording the session, so we'll send out the recording and the presentation afterwards. And there will also be a Q&A towards the end. And as I said earlier as well, we love to hear what you're struggling with, your questions, your concerns, anything that you're kind of wondering for 2024. Make use of this panel of experts. So use the chat, use the Q&A, and then we'll get to your questions towards the end of the session today. All right, but let's actually get started. And I want to preface this by saying that I don't think any of you are going to be surprised by the trends that we're going to talk about today, but we are going to talk about them from maybe some different angles. And recruitment has changed a lot over the past years. I mean, since COVID hit, it's been a tremendous change in every single way that we're working. And now with AI on the rise, I mean, we're just continuing seeing all these changes, right? But some of the struggles that we've talked about for a few years now are still extremely prevalent. And I think one of those that we have talked a lot about is unbiased recruitment. It's something that in the Nordic region, there's been a lot of focus on this over the past few years, and a lot of tools that are helping you with this. Now with AI, there's even more of them. But why are we still talking about this? Why hasn't this kind of been crossed off people's lists? I think that's a good entry point to this. And I think when it comes to unbiased recruitment in 2024, some of the findings that we've seen from interviewing leading TA people across Europe is really the need for different types of competency, right? So it's kind of spurred on this discussion on, should we focus more skill-based over resume focus? And should we maybe think about bias from a different perspective? Because something that we've seen a lot in the past too is that we're not biased anymore. We don't focus on, maybe we do focus skill-based, but then we still focus on kind of being a culture fit, which then that's also something that's now being discussed a lot. How can we be unbiased if we keep hiring people who fit in with our current culture? Because that's, again, an issue, right? Where we see that companies are saying they're hiring unbiased or less biased, but we're still struggling with the same kind of aspects. So let's talk unbiased recruitment. Let's start off there. And the first question is really, I mean, we started talking about this, but why is it becoming even more critical in 2024? And I think I would love to hear your view on this. So Sahar, let's start with you. What's your take on why this is so crucial right now?
I think it's exactly like you said, Tove. It has been on the agenda for some time now. And I believe it's getting more critical because of the consequences, if not dealt with. And two of them being, you miss out of really great talent.
Mhm.
And the second, you will not be able to diversify your talent pool, which is even more important in tougher business climate. And you need diversity and different perspectives to find new solutions to new problems. And that's why I think it's getting more and more important.
Yeah, very good point. Eilin, what's your take? Because you work quite a lot with unbiased recruitment at Simployer as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of focus on this, and it's like what Sahar is saying as well, that we need to be very conscious of this. We need, I think especially with all the different generations that are out there, we see also the need to be more purpose driven than maybe before, and purpose driven, but also the sense of feeling belonging, right? So if you want to feel a sense of belonging, then you need to have a focus on diversity, where you have different competences, culture, perspectives, and so forth. So we have, for example, in Simployer made the decision to not have cover letters in our job ads. We don't do reference checks because there's no evidence that it creates any value in the process. And it's highly subjective as well. So the more subjective we are, the more biased we are likely to be as well. So I think, if we want to have a workforce with diversity and inclusion, where there is belonging and also a sense of purpose, then we need to be very conscious about what are we doing when we are recruiting. And also when looking at CVs, how we will be looking at CVs going forward as well. Will we be looking at CVs? Will be a good big question, because I think it will be even more important looking at the skill sets. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's an important part of being unbiased as well.
Yeah, for sure. Elena, what do you say about this?
Yes, I would like to come from a bit of a different perspective and say that the role of leadership now is changing. So before, you could come as a leader with a vision, right? Like a picture on a PowerPoint, imaging, I don't know, a mountain. We are going there. There is a number there. At the moment, it's not possible anymore. There are multiple visions that you can achieve. And what leadership is about today is to gather different people who are able to co-create these multiple pictures that you might want to go towards to. And then you as a leader together with your people are choosing the most appealing picture for your customers, right? And for your employees and everybody you work with. And I think that in order to do that, you need to have different people in your team, because otherwise this picture will become one. And if you have only one end picture, you know, in the shifting world, you will not succeed. So I think that, you know, when you think like this, you sort of understand that your mission as a leader becomes to choose as different people as possible. And we are not talking only about gender or nationalities. We are also talking about how the brain is wired, you know, how people are thinking, how people are perceiving information, how people are giving the information back. And this is the strength. And I think that this will become the most important strength for the leaders, but also the most important strength for the organizations. So this is the first thing. The second thing I wanted to talk about is I actually wanted to speak about, you know, altruism and intrinsic motivation, because quite a lot of people, I mean, we all have our image, right? So we look as we look, we have our backgrounds, and we are validated by this during our whole life. But this doesn't define us as a human being, right? Because a person is so much more than the outer shell, and it is very, very difficult to show it on a CV. And I think that it is, when it is all about skills, it is important to see beneath the CV, you know, the appearance, even how a person puts the words together. So you need to see the potential of the person, you know, this word, talent and potential, but it should not be shallow anymore. And I must say that, you know, I get goosebumps when I hear some stories, how some companies, they really turn it around. I am deeply, you know, impressed by the B Corp corporation, for example. So it's the body that certifies, you know, companies who are doing good for the communities and for the planet. And my favorite story is the Greystone Bakery. I don't know if you've heard about them, but, you know, it like gives goosebumps every time, because this is the idea of the business when they bake muffins, you know, those that, and biscuits that they use in Ben & Jerry's. So if you like Ben & Jerry's ice cream, that's what you're eating every day. So, and those biscuits and those muffins, they are baked by the people who couldn't get a chance of getting employment because either they were convicted before or they had rough life situation. And the Greystone Bakery were the only ones who gave them a chance, because they saw something else in those people. They saw potential. And they even say that it's more than a bakery, you know, it's more than a muffin, it's more than a job. And also they say that they don't, you know, give jobs to bake muffins, but they bake muffins to give jobs. And I think this is so beautiful. And for me, it's this unbiased and diversity in real life. And just think, a person who gets this opportunity that maybe everybody else said no, how grateful this person would be, how much, you know, altruism and soul the person will put in this single muffin, you know, and how much good together those people create. And then I don't know, I just buy Ben & Jerry because of that, I must say, because it's just like I'm so carried away by this story. But just think, if we could all just try to be like this, to be human in this AI world. I mean, it's needed a lot. And that is why looking behind the CV is so important nowadays, and it's so important for us as humans, but also for businesses, because it creates this purpose that Eilin was talking about.
Yeah, and Eilin, it looked like you had a comment.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about, you know, diversity and inclusion. There's so much research out there, you know, just confirming that it's good for business as well, right? So we need a workforce that is more inclusive, that is more diversified, but it also demands, you know, like Elena is in leadership. It's all about leadership and mindset. So how do we work with leadership within the companies and how do we challenge the mindsets? Because at least from my career in HR 20 years, I meet leaders who prefer or more often recruit people that are more like themselves, right? So if you are to recruit to a diversified team, then it will demand other skill sets from you as a leader as well. So how do you follow up? And research also shows that, you know, it's are more diversified teams more productive for complex issues? Yes, but it's bigger challenge to be a leader when you have a
course.
diversified team, right? So,
Yes.
so you how are you being versatile in your leadership, and how are you supporting them in innovation, development, and so forth?
And this really leads us into this question, right? What strategies can we implement to minimize bias in the hiring process? And what a big part of that is really educating leaders, and especially, I mean, leaders internally who are going to manage this, like a diverse group of people, but also leaders who are in charge of recruitment, right? They're sort of the front line, where if you recruit the way you kind of the same person as you are, then you're never going to reach this. Sahar, what are your thoughts? What strategies can we implement here?
Of course, there are many things that can be done, but one of the most powerful things that I have seen and implemented myself is to set concrete diversity targets and follow them up, not just on company level, but also on team level and in decision forums. That is super important, and making sure that you have representation. And I think this is very important. Make sure your recruiting managers are accountable, and not only your recruiters. And one more thing, I think it's super important that the targets are treated as any other company targets, like the financial targets, for instance. And last but not least, exactly like Elena, Eilin, YouTube said, that coupled with coaching your leaders how to lead diverse teams, because that's not easy, will definitely move the needle.
Lovely way to finish this this topic. I think very concrete advice. Thank you, Sahar. Let's move on. I mean, I could talk about this topic for the entire webinar, but we have more topics to talk about. So let's talk about the second trend. And when it comes to the second trend, it's flexible work. And again, this might feel like, haven't we settled this? I mean, haven't we already talked about this enough? And haven't companies already come to a conclusion on what to do? Well, the problem is that what we're seeing now is that companies did make a decision, and now they might be forced to upend that decision and decide for something else. Because what we're seeing is a lot of companies, and I'm sure that all of you in the audience are aware of this, if not affected by this. A lot of companies have set policies that are limiting the amount of flexible work, and that can be return to office policies, it can be certain office days, it can be a return to 9 to 5, where the working hours have been more flexible before. So there's a lot of things being affected by companies setting these sort of new ways of working. But the problem is that candidates are still requesting flexibility. So even though you might be aware of this, and you might decide on setting those rules anyways and thinking that your talent pool is still big enough, the problem is you might be realizing now that it isn't, not for the roles that we want to fill. So a lot of companies are now in the process of kind of redeciding, what are we actually going to do? How do we solve this? And I think Hung Lee had a really good quote on this in our report as well, but we must reshape work to serve people, not force them into an incompatible economic system. And I think that's a really good way of kind of looking at this through the lens of, why is this important 2024? So let's talk about flexible work. So first of all, what strategies should companies have in place when it comes to workplace balance or work-life balance? Let's start here with Eilin.
Well, I think, again, it depends on what kind of industry you are in, right? In some industries, it's rather a challenge for flexible work life. But I think, again, so what kind of culture do we want? What is our purpose? How do we want to build culture? How do we want to develop our people? I think there's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself before you can land what strategies you have. But I think one of the important things is that, we as a company, we hire knowledgeable, grown-up people. So how do we keep them accountable? So are we to point fingers like we have a parent-child relationship? Or should we rather have dialogues around, okay, so what is important for us? So especially here in Simployer, we focus on, okay, so you have the individual, me as an employee, then you have the team, and then you have Simployer as a company. So we need to be accountable. I need to be accountable for myself, the team, and the organization. So I think also understanding that, all right, so I have my needs, but my needs might have to be, I need to be flexible in order to support the team, right? Because it's more important for the team that we meet up 2 days a week, because we are trying to solve these tasks and we need to meet up again. So I think, again, you know, how are you talking about accountability? How are you talking about empowerment? What kind of trust do you have in the company? And again, we're coming back to it. What kind of leadership do you have in the company? And all that together is then equals what kind of culture do we want to build in the company? So I think, you know, it depends on the company, the industry, and the work to be done. But for sure to have those dialogues and again focus on the accountability part of individual, team, and then the organization.
Very, very good input. Elena, what are your thoughts on work-life balance?
Yeah. I can continue what Eilin is saying, and I also agree that it is all about trust. But there are two parts of it, or even three parts of it, I would say. So one thing is this humanistic part, you know, that we really need to define the purpose. Why? Why are we approaching the flexible working, you know, and in what way? In some organizations, fully remote is the only way, you know, because they are spread, because of their geographical location, or because the timings, you know, how they work, because of the services they provide. For some professions, you know, it makes much more sense to sit focused all the time. So you cannot really define one standard that fits all. You need to start with what are you offering, what your business is like, and what kind of professions are you employing. The second one is the labor law situation. And I think that unfortunately, they are not intact with what is going on the humanistic side. You know, that we would love to trust the employees, we would like to do everything possible, but we are still demanded to create policies. And, you know, it's the word I actually, you know, I used to hate, because I think that policies, they just, you know, sometimes violate human rights of the employees. But it is interesting that sometimes without policies, you just cannot navigate through the legal landscape, you know, and then you end up in the situations that are actually harming employees, because you end up with double taxation rules, for example, or I don't know, you end up with some sort of strange insurance situations. So, you know, and this is not solved yet. So I think that the companies should just have common sense, really, and not go for one standard fits all, you know, let's just do policies for everyone, but to really sort of have this individual experience approach based on the certainty of choices, you know, that the company offers, so that you have, you know, the guideline, what are we here for, what can we offer, and then, you know, you basically adjust it to an individual. So I found it, like, you know, in my work, the most normal common sense approach that works, because you can then balance the legal part and the trust part with it. But there is the next part, which is a well-being part, and I think we are going to talk a bit more about it. And this is also very interesting, you know, that now there is research coming that actually not seeing other people and being fully remote is super harmful for your mental health. And it's a bit, you know, one scientist actually that I talked about, the psychology, I talked to this person yesterday actually, because I was at the seminar about flexible working. And he told me a very interesting thing that I have never ever thought about. He compared remote working, fully remote working for some professions, for some individuals, again, not for everybody, with how we, you know, raise our kids with their diets. Should we allow our kids to eat chocolate all the time, or shall we give them vegetables and broccoli? And if you ask your kid, you know, like, what would you prefer to eat for supper? You know, my sons totally would say chocolate, I'm sure. But you cannot feed them chocolate every day because they will get sick. So this psychologist then yesterday, workplace psychologist, told me that unfortunately, that is what we see for some, parts of the population, especially the younger people who are not socially established in the society, who probably, don't get enough social skills, or they lost the opportunity to get social skills because of the COVID, because they missed those last years of school, for example, or the university, and they were locked in their houses. And in different countries, the situation was differently severe. And now, without access to the real human beings in the corporate life, they still sit at home without any sort of social network. And this actually affects the brain. And it doesn't affect the brain to fully develop, but also, it causes anxiety, it causes depression. It actually can cause very, very significant illnesses. So I must say that after this conversation, I actually started thinking about that maybe we do have a responsibility, to actually still, even if it's a fully remote workplace, still have those cultural gatherings, still somehow solve the weakened social connections for the employees, and help them ignite, this type of social interaction that can help people to feel healthier, better, more secure in themselves, and then to navigate life, better equipped for that. So this is my take on it. I don't know what you think about it, but I felt that, this last discussion about should we really sometimes force people to communicate because it's good for them, it's a very interesting turn in the discussion that I haven't heard before.
Interesting.
Sahar and Eilin, I know you both want to talk on this. Sahar, let's start with you.
But I mean, we are super aligned on the panel on this. And I think that one of the most powerful strategies that I have seen is trust. It is so important for the well-being and for people just be able to have the work-life balance. But I mean, trust also comes with an understanding. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was so individualistic, and I mean, not in the beginning, but a little bit in, it was so individualistic, and it was only about the employee. But I think it's so important, like Eilin said, that to understand the company perspective, the team perspective, the individual perspective, and those together, I mean, if you communicate that and people understand all the different perspectives and coupled with the trust, that I think is really the most powerful strategy for people feeling safe and people for people's well-being.
Eilin, what are your thoughts?
No, I'm so happy you're saying this, Sahar, because I at least see that when we have that strategy here in Simployer, people will understand, okay,
Exactly.
so I have this personal need, but I also want to be a part of this culture.
Exactly.
And I want to do my part.
Mm.
But also to support, to just make a comment on Elena's statement as well, is that not only is it affecting the brain with the flexible work life, but research is also starting to I've seen some research also saying that people are becoming more lonely.
Yes.
And maybe especially after the pandemic, we are human beings who feel, we need to feel that we are part of a tribe, right?
Yeah.
So again, the sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, and the more I'm at home, the more lonely I'm feeling, and it's not good for my well-being. So who's my tribe when I'm sitting at home, right? So I think this is a really good, important discussion also to have, that I understand that you want to work from home, but how is this really affecting you? And what can we do to make, what do you need to have that sense of belonging when you go to work each day?
You know what's interesting, if I may add, so just, continuing your thoughts here, we usually measure productivity of people, right? So how well they perform on their goals, if the goal is achieved, how fast is it achieved? What's the numerical component? It's interesting that when people meet, so we create this emotional connection. And what is emotional connection? Is the energy, right? So that is why, quite a lot of times we speak about offices like, should we have a ping pong table or should we pay for breakfast? But nobody is speaking about how much energy is transferred in the offices? You know, how much energy is transferred at the meeting? Is the meeting going on high, you know, with a lot of ideas? Or is it just, oh, you know, boring, nothing new is there? And it is so interesting because I think that recently in more and more conversations, those parameters are popping up. And that people are started thinking about it because we are humans. We are not just pixels, you know, that or robots that you can only measure on productivity. There is something more in 3D to that. And I think that exactly this, you know, you're at home, absolutely, you are lonely in a way. Yes, of course, you can create different connections and through the different digital sources. But this energy transfer, you know, this ignition of that happens at the brainstorm meeting, I am not sure that it is well achieved only remotely. So it's interesting how we're going to measure and actually appreciate those things in the future.
Mm. This is a hot topic now. I know you're all passionate about this. Okay, Sahar, go.
I really agree with that. The energy, I think it's so important, but I think that it is important to ask yourself, what is the purposeful work at the office? Everything is not purposeful. If you are working hybrid or remote, I mean, if you're sitting by yourself by Excel all day, then you don't need to be in the office. But if you have a workshop, if you need other people's input, creating that energy together in the same room, that's purposeful. I think that is so important to remember, that every type of work does not need to be in collective, but the work that creates the energy and the different perspectives, that needs to be in that framing, I think.
Agreed. And you know what, it goes further. I'm sorry that I interrupt here. You know, going further to what Sahar says, why are you coming to work? We want strategies, right? So how to implement work-life balance. The first thing you should do is look at how you drive the meetings in your organization. You know, what are those meetings about? Are people allowed to co-create? Are people allowed to speak? Or is it only one person speaking and always a fixed agenda? Because, you know, very often, people say that they invite employees to the office to co-create, but then the agenda is rigid and it's one person presenting for an hour and everybody is silent, and then they leave the meeting and then there is no co-creation happening. And this is, again, should be aligned. Why are we here? You know, why are those people invited? So fix the meeting culture, I would say, if you want to have a really, really first strategy for that.
Eilin, I'm going to put the word with you now.
But I also need to we need to also reflect upon, you know, I've seen research on this, and I believe you also will have it in your report for Jobland, Tove. But I think, you know, when we look at the different generations, so we see that Generation Z more often wants to come to the office, right?
Yes.
And then those that are more seniors would like to be more working from home. Well, that will have some consequences, because Gen Z want to be more at the office. So who is going to be doing the training of them? Who is going to with the informal rules of the culture and somehow. So, and what happens then to upskilling? What happens then to innovation and so forth? So
true.
So you need to bear that in mind as well. So what kind of consequences is it? And who is actually coming to the office if you look at the different generations?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you still provide on-the-job training, upskilling, and so forth? So be aware.
Excellent point. Yeah, excellent point. Sahar, last quick comment
quick.
from you, and then we're going to switch
just
topics.
referring to the meeting culture. I wrote an article about it. I think it's so important to put a dollar on it. How much does it cost? Sitting 30 people together, what does it cost, and is it worth it? You put a number on every investment. Do it on your meetings as well.
I think that's a great
pro
point.
tip.
And I think that goes for flexible work in general too, to your previous points as well, in terms of actually making sure that what you're doing in the office is purposeful. Because if we see that we ask 30 people to commute to the office, because we're going to do something together and then we don't end up co-creating together, then what is the time spent that they could have spent doing other projects that they were traveling back and forth to the office, right? So I think there's always that kind of balance between what we're talking about and what the cost actually is.
Yeah.
But let's switch to the last topic here, which ties in a lot with these two former ones, which is employee experience. And employee experience, really, when we look at it, I mean, this is also something that companies should really be focusing on this. And everything we've touched upon so far, workplace, like work-life balance, workplace flexibility, and how to actually focus on that, what we're deciding. I mean, all of that, and unbiased recruitment as well, and fostering an inclusive environment, all of that ties into the employee experience, right? But when it comes to the employee experience, there's still not a lot of focus actively being put on this. So when we talk about retention, for example, we need increased retention in order to cover the talent shortages that we see, the need for, the skills gaps that we're going to continue to see with the rise of AI. Obviously, we're going to see more skill gaps maybe going forward because there's so much new technology that not a lot of people are familiar with. But then we also see this increased focus on then needing to upskill and reskill. You can't just retain people. You need to also give them the skills that they need. And really kind of landing in that employee experience is really the new candidate experience. So in 2024, while candidate experience is still crucial, if we can focus on employee experience, we might not need to recruit as much because we'll retain more people, we'll be able to upskill them instead. So when we talk about employee experience, my first question here is really, what do you think the biggest challenges that organizations face are when it comes to employee experience? And I think for this one, let's start with you, Elena.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that the biggest challenges that organizations face is that we started the work with employee experience pre-pandemics, pre-real crisis. And quite a lot of things that we were doing in employee experience, they actually, I'm sorry to say, they were shallow. We were thinking about perks. We were thinking about the canteen layout. We were thinking about, I don't know, free breakfast or chocolate in the reception. It just all doesn't matter. And now then when pandemics happened, so we got locked in, some people got in dangerous health situation, then, the war, geopolitical situation, all the crises, earthquakes that are happening. We understood that actually, people are there, they are ready to help their colleagues. They don't need, jelly bean things in the reception. They really they want the real purpose. They want a real connection. They want to like people they work with, and they want to be liked. Then also in the grimness of this life going on around, people just want to have fun. They just want to come to work and, they do work, but they also want to have a place to relax mentally. And how do you relax? It's not lying on the sofa watching Netflix. It's relax in the company of people who understand you, who are on the same wave with you. And this is just so important now. And it goes back to leadership. How do you create emotional connections in your team? How are your people interacting with each other? What do you reward? What kind of behaviors you reward? How do you build this culture? Why do we need the culture? And it's so interesting with this employee experience, because what is the employee experience? It's a journey. And then this is the journey that consists of different moments. And those moments, they are interactions. They can be an interaction with the company. They can be interaction with your colleagues or with your manager. So what you want is those interactions to be memorable, to bring up, good emotions. You want people to feel uplifted. You want people to believe in themselves. So I think that now we started to come to this understanding of those real moments that matter, that it's not about, I don't know what color of a t-shirt I get when I don't know, participate in a company marathon, but it is all about the real connection, real response. How do we react on crisis together? How do we support each other? How do we help each other? So basically we come back to this humanization again, being human leaders, being authentic, not being vulnerable, not being afraid of showing myself, to the colleagues how I am. And I think that it's actually very interesting how it's shaping out now. It's full of opportunities, but it's also pretty scary. Because if you take a leader, you know, it's not only managing the process now. You need to manage all of those things. You need to also be a real human in the workplace. You need to allow time to listen to your employees. You need to allow time, you know, sometimes not even to give advice, but just to be there for them. And it is time consuming. And it is sort of like more than any job would demand from you. And that is why it's a real challenge now. The real challenge is how do you fit it all in your work? You know, when you come to work, you need to deal with the process, you need to deal with documentation, you need to deal with some, I don't know, sort of things that you have to do every day operationally, but then you need to be also a human, you need to be a colleague, and you also need to be a manager who is not just a manager, but a coach and a mentor as well. And you need to transfer your knowledge. So I would say that's the real challenge for me now. And I would say that we need to do absolutely everything to support our leaders in that. And because of this, leadership became not just a profession and a skill, it became a calling. I don't think everybody can do it. I think you need to really want to do it nowadays in order to succeed with this.
Eilin, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think, you know, for most companies, they really have track on what kind of customer experience they are creating every single day. And this has fascinated myself through my career, is that how many companies really know how they are creating a good employee experience? Are you tracking the employee experience the same way as you are the customer experience? And I find that many companies are not doing that. So I think one of the biggest challenges facing right now is actually investing in the time to understand what is our current employee experience, where we're creating the good moments that Elena and talking about. Where do we need to make changes? What do we need to do more of, less of, or even stop doing in order to create that employee experience? And again, we come back to having a purpose, feeling the sense of belonging. We are human beings. AI is coming on that speed train. So how are we still humanizing going to work, right? So I think it's a challenge for many companies to actually, you know, invest the time needed to understand what is needed to create a good employee experience in our company.
Sahar, what are your thoughts?
I mean, first of all, I'm really overwhelmed to be invited to the same expert panel as these brilliant ladies. I'm so happy for that. I believe one of the biggest challenges for the employers is to be consistent and create a sense of belonging, as Eilin also said, in a hybrid and remote setting. And I firmly believe in three things to create an inclusive employee experience in the hybrid remote world. And one of them being that we've talked about now is leadership. I really believe in collective leadership, not just the individual leadership, but the collective leadership. Leaders need to be aligned and drive the company mission and get their teams on board. That's so important, and not hide behind, oh, the company decided this. We all need to be focusing on where we are going together. I think that's number one important. And one other thing that we were so great at during the pandemic was consistent and frequent communication. But I feel that we've forgotten about that. That is, I mean, having regular team meetings, one-to-ones, virtual town halls, and consistent updates across all teams will help creating a shared sense of purpose. And by ensuring that employees have the same kind of information and have access to information and opportunities, organization can foster a cohesive work environment. And last but not least, and my personal favorite, is recognizing and creating and celebrating achievements publicly. I love that. And at the Viaplay, when we were there, one of our most frequently used channels by employees was a Slack channel called Appreciation, where you could appreciate your colleagues. And it was so frequently used by employees. And it was a mandatory channel that everyone was enrolled to. And at first, I mean, I was the only one updating this channel. But after a while, I mean, people just tagged along and they loved it. So I think that by really remembering those, you can create an inclusive culture where belonging is felt by the employees.
I think we're gonna, just so we have time for
Yes.
questions as well, we're gonna move in and talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing in the Nordic financial market. But I think really good points, and kind of segueing into that too is just realizing that, you know, we are kind of facing difficult financial times. A lot of companies are struggling. People are still being laid off, or again being laid off, and companies are not really maybe managing that the best way either. But when it comes to actually thinking about the employee experience, that's a big part of that, right? And realizing that in difficult financial times, maybe it's also important to celebrate like the small wins, lift each other up, like you said, Sahar, in that type of appreciation manner, but also maybe just feeling like, okay, but we actually got this and this done this week. Maybe that's enough, you know? But let's talk about
can
this.
I just add a very important thing on this, coming back to the candidate experience, right? And coming back to recruitment and coming back to hard economic times. I think that everything we spoke about, and then, you know, like ending with employee experience is so important, because this is actually how you do business nowadays. A lot of companies, and we started with you working for JobBelong, Eilin working for your company, right? It is, you are the representatives of your customer group as well. And we speak now very often about customer zero, meaning that, you know, I, as a customer, I see the employee of the company, I see how nice, you know, you are treated, how great you have it at work, you know, how dedicated you are to your tasks. And I want to be you. I want to have your life. I want to work there, and then I want to buy your product. I must say, I had the same journey with JobBelong, because I know a person you hired who is, like, by any standards, the best expert in recruitment I've ever met. I've met you, Tove, I've met Sofia, and I just see how much fun you have. I went and listened to the podcast of your CEO, and I was just mind blown about, you know, his approach to recruitment. Now in my mind, there is no better solution than JobBelong, because I know how great people, you know, how great you are, how much fun you have at work, and what an amazing leader you have. So this is all about the employee experience and how you transpose it to your customers. And that brings value, because now I am going to go around and tell everybody about JobBelong, right? So you've just got a customer group, you know, here for free. So this is how companies should think. And unfortunately, in the current times, this is where the cuts are happening. The first cuts are happening, you know, on the employee experience budgets, but they don't think that this is actually equal to your marketing budget. It is equal to your sales budget, and you can do so much more with this. So this is, I just really wanted for everyone to understand, because this is so important nowadays, where we're trying to, you know, to strip, to fine tune, to find money there, and then use it for the external marketing purposes.
Yeah, I think this ties in perfectly with what the retention strategy should be, right? Focus on the employee experience and get those people who are inspiring other people to think good about the company. I mean, as you said, Elena, it's kind of a small effort, because you get to retain your good employees, and you also get free marketing through that. But Sahar, what are your thoughts when it comes to the job market as it is right now, and what companies can think about?
I mean, I think exactly like Elena said, it is always important, but now more than ever, to be honest with your employee brand and to reflect the reality. I believe the job market in 2024 will be the employees market, even though we have seen layoffs in 2023. And a glossy surface and a reality with crackles will not be accepted, not by your employees and nor by the candidates. And exactly like you said, getting the brand and the reality aligned will create internal ambassadors, and that will also attract the best talent. And I really believe.
Eilin, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's about working systematically with employer branding, and how are you using employer branding as a tool to attract and retain people, right? And we've, through this hour, talked about how do we humanize, so how do we portray the culture that we have within our companies in a non-glossy way, right? So again, with talents out there, we get feedback that, what was it that motivated you to apply for this role? And the first thing they say, well, it was the wording within your job ad. And I'm like, really? So what was it? So again, how are we how are we strategically working with the employer branding? What kind of personas do we have for each of the different roles? How do we display the culture that we have within the company? Because that's what we see is an important aspect for those who are trying to find a new employer.
Yeah.
What kind of culture is it that Simployer has, for example? And does that appeal to me? What are the values? And how does the vision and the values, align? And how does that appeal to myself? So that is something I think it's really important that you have some company values, but what are your personal values? And how does that interlink with the company values? So I think it's all about also, what kind of questions are we asking also in the interview process? How are we managing expectations in the interview process? So I think that will be important going forward is actually how are you using employer branding as a tool to both retain and attract talents.
Sahar.
And just a quick point, I have never seen as many candidates in the recruitment process contacting people in the company to ask how things really are than the last couple of years. So to walk the talk has never been as important as now.
Yeah, no, and there's so many resources and ways
Yes.
for candidates to find out if what you're saying is not true. So definitely a good point. We're gonna move into questions, but Elena, last comment from you.
Very, very small comment. With all the layoffs that are going on now, it's so many good people out there, and there are so many talent acquisition departments now that are understaffed as well.
Yeah.
So the biggest problem that I see in the Nordic right now is that the candidates don't find companies because companies, they are understaffed to answer all the candidates. And I think that here we come to the AI question. Don't be afraid, of outsourcing some of those routine tasks, like interview scheduling, or I don't know, probably keyword search or whatever, do AI if you can better your candidate response, because it is nothing worse than wanting to work for some cool company. You admire people there, you write them and you have no answer. You write to them and you have no answer again. And then you lose the trust. And then the whole brand work that you have done is actually lost. So I would say here that let's look at the AI tools and let's see how we can, offload our TA departments with this candidate experience path.
Very, very good point. And we actually have a question about AI too. So we'll start with that one. But first of all, thank you so much for your input on these different topics. I think this has been super rewarding, and I hope that all of you who are with us have felt the same. What happens after this? Well, first we'll have a Q&A, and the full presentation and recording will be sent out. And then you'll get access to our newest report. So again, 3 of the trends we talked about, there's a lot more information in the report, of course. And then there's also 4 more trends to be aware of. So definitely take a look at that. But let's move into Q&A, and let me find the AI question here that I saw earlier. I'm gonna stop sharing here. So the question we had earlier, I think you, Elena, kind of answered it a little bit from your point, but the question was, which way do you recommend that companies start using AI tools in recruitment? And maybe which ways do you not recommend? I think that was a really good question. So Elena, since you already kind of started on this question, let's hear Sahar and Eilin as well on this one.
Eilin, you want to go first?
Oh, you can go first, Sahar.
I think one of the things is that I don't think you need to be afraid, but also at the same time, remember that the AI input is from people. So you still need to be aware of the biases. It's super important to still train your managers, to still work with biases. So that's from what you should not do, but don't be afraid. Just use the tools because they will help you. They will help you to free up time to focus on the things that actually move the needle.
Eilin, what do you say?
Yeah, I would say that, there are risks, but don't be afraid of the risks. Explore, but be aware of the potential biases that are within AI. And what kind of guidelines do you have internally to address those possible biases that you might meet during this process? But I think, there are a lot of risks with AI. But if you are afraid of the risks, then you are going to lose out somehow. So at least take the time to explore, to find out what are the possibilities for you, and be aware of the biases.
Absolutely. Elena, do you have any other thoughts on AI?
Well, we had a bit of a pre-talk before, and we were talking about that a lot of people are getting irritated now, that a lot of candidates are using AI, to adjust their CVs or cover letters. And my message is, well, don't get irritated by this. That's so cool, because we are now hiring for skills, right? If you have a person who figured out how to put keywords into their CV, I mean, this is an amazing talent for you to have, because this person will fix all your ads, all your targeted marketing, and whatever else you want to do, all your sales processes. So just be open for that and don't be afraid of it. Just see the upside as well, together with being cautious about, all the risks that AI is bringing. But this is for compliance department. I think that let's evaluate talents first here.
I think actually that's a really good point too when it comes to, I mean, first of all, the point of candidates using AI is something that we talk too little about. I think it's a perspective that we often don't talk about. But I think also from a compliance perspective, just to be aware that, personal information being managed by AI is probably not the best, because we don't know yet where that information is being processed and what's happening with it. So I think it's also an important, just like a little red flag waving in the back, that to always consider that when you're using AI tools. But a different question that I think was really good as well, and I know we're running out of time here, so I'll let you know. First of all, we got a question or a comment here as well. AI is more problematic when we use it to rule people out of processes without human intervention. I think that's a really, really good point as well.
And can I say, Tuve, actually, it's exactly the same as we experienced with the tests before. You remember when the tests appeared, we started ruling out people only because of test results, misunderstanding the test should be used only as the ground for the next interview. So I think that with any tool, is the same first reaction. Just be careful how you use it. It is a tool. It's not the solution.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, we always need human intervention, and I think that's like the thin line that we have to walk between being effective, but also having that human perspective on things and making sure that we understand what the tools actually do. But another question that just came in that I think we'll take right away is, which part of the recruitment process do you think makes sense to outsource to recruitment companies or executive search? I think this was a good question. Eilin, what do you say?
Which part of the recruitment process? Well, it depends on the role that you are going to recruit to, I would say. So we in Simployer, we use have different kind of solutions for that. Some parts is about search of the candidates, other parts is for the whole recruitment process. So it depends on what the needs are for the role and what are the challenges in finding those kind of talents for that role. So I don't think there's a quick and easy answer for that.
No.
I think it's more to know how much resources you have as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you have a great search team, why should you do that? But maybe you don't have the, I don't know, executive evaluation team or something like this. So I think it's depending on how you staffed, all the outsourced resources, they're here to help you to complement your current team. So you need to be very mindful. If you are using executive search, but you have the full staffed TA, I would question that.
Yes.
Yep.
Fully agree.
Very good point.
I agree.
And let's take one last question before we sign off. But we got a question here that was, we still struggle a lot with getting our leaders to understand why employee experience and flexibility is so critical. What's your best advice to actually get them to understand? I think this is a really important one, considering everything talked about today boils down to employee experience. Obviously, it's important that the leaders understand the importance. Elena, what are your thoughts?
I think that you need to help leaders to understand how it will boost the business, how it will boost the profits, and how it will boost them in their leadership. So don't try to change their mind shift coming from you're doing that wrong. Show, the power up route. So I think this is the best. And of course, we are talking here about how do you measure, something unmeasurable, but it doesn't have to be unmeasurable. You can find other measures as well, and you can find good examples, and you can also help people to see, the money traps, and you can see this, you can help them to see the synergies. Quite often people are fighting for their own budgets. I believe here in this cross cooperation. I believe here that the HR leader goes to marketing leader, goes to the chief operating officer, go to finance officer, and you find synergies in everything. One little example. So for example, in marketing, we are using CRM systems, just to send automatic messages to your customers. Very many HR systems don't have this possibility. They don't have, this operation in their systems. Why don't we just go to our marketing departments and put in our employees there for free in their system and start using CRM? It doesn't cost anything, saves a lot of money. You test all your CRM for customers on your employees, double win. It saves you budgets. So just try, teaming up with your senior colleagues and other teams and just find these clever solutions because they're so needed nowadays.
Sahar, what are your thoughts?
One of the things that helped us get our leaders onboarded was to introduce inclusive decision making, and that might sound scary, but you need to just be transparent. I mean, you can ask your people what they want, and also be transparent about that. You need to look at different perspectives, and when we did that, we increased EMPS and also engagement across all the teams over time, and created a resilient organization. And showing that also to the leaders, they understood that it is really important to include the people's perspective, although you always don't, that's not the only perspective for the decision, but you just need to be transparent across the board to your people. I think that helped us.
Very good. Eilin, what are your...
I just want to say, why is there a need to focus on that? What kind of data do we have to support whether it's like this or this? What kind of examples do we have to support whether it's like this and this? So I think it's, pulling it down so that people can really relate and understand, seeing the data, having examples, and then understanding why. Why is it important for business? Why is it important for the culture, the sense of belonging, diversity and inclusion, productivity, innovation? The list goes on. But you need the data, you need the examples, and you need to have defined a why.
Excellent way to finish that question, and also to finish up this webinar. I think that goes for everything we've talked about today, actually. Just consider all of these aspects and why we're really doing this. And I think you've come a really, really long way. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the audience for being here, for asking great questions. I'm glad to see some appreciative words here in the comment section as well. Really, really nice to hear. Thank you to our wonderful panel. You're three fantastic, inspiring women, and I'm so happy that we were able to have all three of you here today. So thank you so much, and I wish you all a happy Wednesday, and read the trend report when we send it out, because it's going to be a good one. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Bye.